Hi, my name's Ian Puddick. People know me online because I was involved in a huge police operation called Operation Bohan by the Qaeda Terrorism police. I won every single case. The police abused me in custody. I was brutalised. The CCTV was wiped. And I made a huge fuss about it and tried to hold every single officer to account, including the police commissioner. During that time, I met David Shayler. And David Shayler is a former MI5 officer. We became very good friends. He stayed with me here at my office for quite a period of time. Unfortunately, that was a joke. So we're going to do an interview with David Shayler, and it's about life inside MI5. Now, obviously, there are restrictions, the Official Secrets Act, etc. So we're not going to breach the Official Secrets Act. David wrote a book that the government initially tried to ban called Spies, Lies and Whistleblowers. And it was eventually republished with some redactions. I did actually find out what the redactions were, and it's very interesting. So I'm going to do something I've never done before, and I probably, hopefully, will never do again. David has had a very difficult time. I'm not going to say any more than that. You can watch the interviews and you can make up your own mind what kind of lifestyle David has had to have, unfortunately, because of how he's been treated. So none of my YouTube channel, some of my videos have had 1.5 million views. My YouTube channel is not monetized. None of my videos are monetized. I don't make 1p from YouTube, and my plans are never to do that. However, this one video, there will be a link under the video for donations at your discretion, and every single penny will go to my good friend David Shayler. As I said, you can make up your mind. You listen to what David's got to say. Listen to what's happened to him. He's a good man. He's an honest man. He told the truth and was destroyed for it. Well, not totally destroyed. So that's my introduction, and I look forward to speaking to David. So David, it's the big one, the $1 million question. So you became, I think, world-renowned. Certainly, it was a global story. You became an important person in terms of whistleblowing, doing something that obviously I don't want to say cost you your life, but I think they tried. I don't know if there's any dispute that they tried to absolutely destroy you. Yeah. And Annie, obviously, are both at the same time. I've deliberately not mentioned Annie because she's not here, so we can't talk about her. I didn't think that was fair. But if you want to just talk us through that. But obviously, we've now got a famous whistleblower now who's in prison in London. He's in solitary confinement, and if you were to ask him and say, what has this man done to be in solitary confinement, to be in prison, what court has convicted him, what has he been convicted of? The answer to all those questions is he's not convicted of anything. He's not been found guilty in any court, and yet he's in solitary confinement, and it's Julian Assange. Now, a lot of and where are the press on this? Where is the mainstream media? They don't mention him. They mention him at a glance, and they generally spout the government narrative on Julian Assange. I think the fairest summary of Julian Assange was from Andrew Neil, who you could clearly see doesn't care for Julian Assange, but because he's such a professional journalist, he could see the value that Julian Assange was bringing to the industry in the public interest. And I thought he wrote a really interesting piece in the Daily Mail where he just said that this should be all mainstream journalists should be talking about this because they're next, and they're not. But I think Andrew was great to point that out. Obviously, George Galloway's a personal friend of Julian Assange and a huge champion, and mentions him all the time on his shows. But yourself, if you want to I'll let you kick off. This is what this interview is about. Yeah. What happened?
Well, when I was blowing the whistle, and people were critical of me, and some of those people were on the left and in what we'd think the organisation that would offer support, when they were not doing that, I was saying to them, if they can get away with this with me, they'll get away with it in future for all sorts of things, all sorts of whistleblowers. And let's be clear, Assange is up there because WikiLeaks released images of US war crimes.
Yeah, killing journalists.
Yes.
Massacring journalists.
Yeah, this is how crazy
the guys that killed them have been promoted. All the politicians that authorised the killing, well, nothing's happened to them. But the chap that brought it to our attention that public money is being used to massacre journalists, and they died in the most inhumane way, is in prison for doing that.
Yeah, they actually make people...
That's democracy.
They make people who are witnesses to the most serious crimes the criminals. That's what they do. And that doesn't make sense on any level, of any philosophical or political level or anything else.
No.
If you're going to make witnesses into criminals, it's the end of the rule of law. It's the end of civilization. It's the end of normal relationships between human beings.
Yeah, no, of course.
But I was trying to tell people this stuff 20 years ago, saying, look, you don't support me properly with this, they're going to come after you.
Yeah, of course.
And of course they have come after journalists as well.
Yeah, of course.
We know that in other cases. So this was the precedent they should have dealt with in my own case. But let's be clear about why I was blowing the whistle, what I was a witness to.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, kick off just because a lot of people will know you by reputation, won't know the whole story.
Yeah.
So you got information. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You got information, and just tell the story. What happened?
Yeah. I'd say by this point it's 1995. I've been working with MI6 for about a year. Because I'm actually quite good at management things, they'd actually take MI6 would take me into their confidence. Because you
played squash with them, didn't you?
That's right. Got annihilated. Yeah.
I just thought I'd bring that up. I know David got annihilated in the basement of the MI6 building. There's squash courts.
That's right. Legoland, it's known in the trade. Yes, the green and
David got annihilated. It's all you need to know. Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. And because I was actually quite good at management stuff and actually making progress towards targets, I worked very closely with them. And they liked what I was doing for them, so they took me into their confidence. But unfortunately, what they took me in their confidence about was an assassination operation. Now, I was called, this wasn't done normally, I was called over to MI6 by myself to go and be briefed on this. But nevertheless, it was an official briefing by my opposite number, who was someone called PT16B. And essentially, what they were saying was they'd had what's known as a walk-in or a volunteer.
And PT16B, did you know him or her prior to this?
No, only through MI6, yeah.
Okay.
There were two of them, PT16B, PT16B1. Their names are in the public domain. They're Richard Bartlett and David Watson. So I'm not revealing anything new here. And what essentially happened was he told me that they had a walk-in or a volunteer in the Tunis embassy. And Tunis is obviously next to Libya. A Libyan military intelligence officer who gathered together a group of Islamic terrorists to try and overthrow Gaddafi. Now, although this is 1995, by this point MI5 already knows the new threat to the West is Islamic terrorists. So my first thing was to be surprised that they were even talking to Islamic terrorists. And it goes on, but I actually thought, MI6 are coming with so many crazy ideas by this point, all of which have just quietly disappeared. You ask me, that's what I just thought this is more their boys' own stuff, basically. So this will be something they'll go on.
Are they more James Bond or more Austin Powers?
More Austin Powers, I think, although they like to think themselves as James Bond. In fact, they like to think themselves as George Smiley in some ways from the Le Carre, but they're just not that clever.
It's one of my best films, my favourite films.
So MI6 were going on about this operation. The guy, they said, asked for support and money to be able to get the weapons together and whatever else he needed. And they actually put out what's known as a CX report. This is how MI6 communicates with Whitehall and other government departments. And that was in early December 1995, and this actually said that the agent was involved in the plot. Didn't they make it absolutely clear he's not just reporting on it, he's involved. It describes the modus operandi, which was to attack Gaddafi when he was out and about on a public meet and greet, basically. And it all went quiet for a couple. Once I saw that, I then realised they must have been paying money. So I checked with PT16B1, and he confirmed to me they had made payments to this group. Now, it was that point...
So that's British taxpayers' money?
Yeah, going to essentially fund an operation which is murder and funding our terrorist enemies. And I do say this to people. People say, you're a traitor. And I say, do you know that
one of my questions, he's beaten me to it, is are you a traitor?
And I would say that, do you really think somebody who's blowing the whistle on our intelligence services, funding our terrorist enemies and putting the lives at threat in this country is a traitor? Of course not. Of course you're not a traitor for that. You're trying to protect the lives of your fellow countrymen. They're the traitors. Absolute traitors to democracy, to everything, basically, to the trust we put in them.
So, this all sounds like, to any normal bloke or woman, a working normal person, that our intelligence services that are there to protect us, to look after us, we pay money, we pay a lot of money to do that, and we respect them, and we probably don't even value them, to be quite frank, because we don't think about them. They, not all of them, we're just talking about people within these organisations would take public money give them to terrorists to fund a terrorist operation to kill somebody we don't like. It's inconceivable. It's just conspiracy. David, you made it all up, and the people that told you are full of shit. That's the easier thing to believe. However, we can cross-reference these things. So in the US at the moment, there's a guy called, he's a senator, and he's also a former Pentagon advisor, Colonel Richard Black, Senator Richard Black. There's a video online of him explaining in detail, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing because we haven't got time, but you can watch it. It's just the most shocking thing I've ever heard about how the US CIA fund Al Qaeda, and they arm them, they train them, they give them obviously public money, American money, and Al Qaeda is a friend of America, and how they beheaded a little boy, and it's on. You can see the video online. It's the most disturbing. I didn't watch that video because I'd never be able to sleep again. I'd never be able to get it out of my head. But they beheaded a little boy, and they're our friends, they're our colleagues. We fund them. They're our allies. Because they're doing our bidding somewhere to go and kill somebody we don't like. It's inconceivable. So, is Colonel Richard Black, Senator Black lying? Possibly. But again, cross-referencing it. Well, I mentioned earlier in a previous video about the collusion in Ireland by the British state killing people that we don't like. I think David Cameron actually apologised, didn't he, in Parliament? Because of
Bloody Sunday.
And also was it the Pat Finucane as well?
I'm not so sure about it. It was definitely the Bloody Sunday thing. And that was another thing I blew the whistle on. They tried to skew the Bloody Sunday inquiry.
It's in your book.
Yeah, it's in the book. Basically, just in a nutshell.
Say.
In a nutshell, what they were. I saw this intelligence saying Martin McGuinness, who was obviously the head of Sinn Féin, had fired the shot in 1972 that had led to the British Army then essentially retaliating. But when I found out who the agent source was, somebody called Infliction, he was known in MI5 as a bullshitter. So they were trying to put bullshit intelligence into the inquiry. And because I blew the whistle on this, of course, the inquiry heard my evidence. They also found out that MI5 had actually blacked out agent reliability not fully established. They're supposed to black out stuff for national security reasons. That's not a national security reason again. That is to skew the truth and the evidence, basically. And Annie gave evidence as well about it because she'd come across his report.
Yeah.
And in the end, David Cameron had to get up in front of Parliament
and
apologise unreservedly to the Irish people who were gunned down in cold blood by the British Army, basically. I don't think anybody says, our boys do a good job. They don't. When they do these things, that increases terrorism. So it's not just in the funding of it, it's doing inflammatory things like gunning down unarmed Catholics, who then, the relatives said, well, we're going to have to defend ourselves with guns because the British government's not going to do it. That's how terrorism starts. You've got to understand these things.
Yeah, but just to be really clear, David and I are completely non-violent. If David and me are going to have a fight, he's got to have better trainers than me because he's going to have to catch me because it's not going to be a fight because I'm a complete wimp. And I know you're completely non-violent, so there's not going to be a fight. But it's about issues of accountability, which is why we're doing this. And there isn't real accountability. There's the perception of accountability. But I'm just thinking, if some things to watch if you want to see collusion between the British government and terrorists. Netflix documentary, the Miami Showdown Massacre. What happened to those lads? Watch the documentary. It just will shock you. Will absolutely shock you. And one that I learnt about about 5-6 years ago was Pat Finucane. Pat Finucane was a human rights lawyer. He was a Catholic. His wife was a president. Can't even say it. That was it. That was easy for you to say. He represented people from both sides of the community divide or religious divide, so there was no issues there for him. He did obviously represent Sinn Féin and the terrorists, and he had such a good track record of winning in court because of the violations by the army and the state that they assassinated him. And they assassinated by shooting at his breakfast table with his kids, in front of his family because they didn't like him. And that was government collusion. I think they even traced the gun, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah,
It's
that's part of a wider thing called shoot to kill. And again, John Stevens did the inquiry into this, and I found out because he was the chief constable of Northumbria. I was up there. And that's the convent I was telling you about in the operation. That they had they had one Stevens inquiry, and it had been burnt down. Would you believe? This thing that proved the shoot to kill collusion. So they had to do a second inquiry, and that was under armed guard, on permanent 24-hour armed guard at Northumbria Police, to make sure that didn't happen again. So this again shows you the elements in this society who will destroy an inquiry that reveals
to stop
their
the truth coming
criminality.
out.
Yeah. And again, there's another Le Carré novel where I think it's Richard Burton, in The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and the film says we have to occasionally do terrible things so you can sleep safely in your beds. And that's just not true at all. They are doing terrible things that make it less safe for us to sleep in our beds. Because I say, all of this escalates terrorism. It's like the assassination attempts on Gaddafi. The reason that Lockerbie happened was it was retaliation for the
I never got my £1,000.
bombing of Tripoli in 1986, when the British and Americans bombed Tripoli. So Lockerbie's revenge attack for that, and then you get the assassination of Gaddafi going on. And all happens in these things, innocent people die all the time. There's be sure as eggs is eggs, innocent people will die.
In the by the way, in a previous video, the reason I meant about the £1,000, Colonel Gadaffi, genuinely, it's really not a joke, owes me £1,000. You have to see the previous video to find out why. But going back to the MI6 plot to kill Gaddafi, they didn't kill Gaddafi.
Yeah, well, what happened was basically this was like, by this time it's Christmas 1995. I'm about to be 30 years old. So I go home for my Christmas break thinking, where the hell has my life gone? When I left university, I had visions of being, some sort of commissioning editor or whatever, some sort of decent sub on a newspaper. And here I am, up to my eyeballs, essentially as part of a terrorist plot. And so
that to a nicer bloke.
That was the moment that I decided I was going to leave the service. When I went back, about 2 months later, about February 1996, there was a GCHQ report, there were two of them, that both described an attack upon Gaddafi's life, but using, crucially, the modus operandi that had been outlined in the CX report published to government in December. So that was the key to it, the fact that it was the same modus operandi. I read this and my blood ran cold. I just felt...
How many innocent people died?
11 people died.
And did one of his daughters get killed? Gaddafi's daughters?
That was supposed to be Tripoli 86,
So
they've tried to deny that since.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not the numbers.
So British taxpayers funding an operation, giving the money to terrorist Al Qaeda who killed innocent people.
Yeah. Now let's be clear about this in law. The British taxpayer in law is a murderer for that because they have paid to a government
Unknowingly.
But if you don't, not knowing is not a defence in law. If you have suspicion that people have done things like this in the past, and you pay money to them, and let's face it, they were exposed in the 1950s.
Now, can I just stop you? Whatever you think of David, he's my friend, so I'm biased. I don't give him a tough time because we're friends, and he speaks, and I've got to beat him up to get a story out of him. He speaks, doesn't stop. Whatever you think of David, if you can imagine going back, he's a golden oldie like me now. If you can imagine him working in a service that culturally didn't have working class people in there, but was trying to change, and we, obviously respect for that. David's come in as a northeast lad, and you're a bloke, aren't you? You're a man's man. You're a bloke. You're down to earth, very friendly. Talks a bit too much, but it takes courage, which is why I said this, to stand up in an organisation where you know that this just isn't right, to do something about it rather than just be compliant, head down and carry on working. It takes courage. Now whether you respect that, like that, don't like that, that's fine. It's for you to make up your own opinions. But I just think it took enormous courage for David and Annie to both do that. A huge sacrifice to themselves and no gain whatsoever. No gain whatsoever. So I just thought I wanted to say that, sorry.
Yeah, so basically, now that the operation's taken place, I redoubled my efforts to get out of MI5. So by the summer of 1996, I'm working as a management consultant. I've already met the Mail on Sunday because I wanted to get this thing off my chest, basically. But I didn't give them the details or anything like that. I told them that I had some things to blow the whistle on in MI5. Didn't have to start with, and then in December of that year, I decided I wanted to go on the record and do it. We couldn't get a book published about it, so in August 1997, the Mail on Sunday published my disclosures, but not about MI6 funding Al Qaeda, which is
really what it's all about.
Yeah. So what they would then have is a week where I'm abroad, trying to stay one step ahead of them, picking up the English media to find out what they're saying about me after my whistleblowing, but also reading about Princess Diana talking about having to make a major announcement and them talking about having a bulge and this sort of thing. Now on the Saturday, the government takes out an injunction to stop the Mail on Sunday publishing essentially the Gaddafi plot. At this point, I think we've won, because I think they're going to have to take the evidence at this point. It's going to go all over the world. So I go to bed that night thinking, wow, this is all being a bit simple. Week in, and we're more or less over.
Yeah.
Get the next morning, turn the French telly on, there's a documentary on about Princess Diana, which I can't figure out why it's on that time of morning, until the end of the thing goes, La Princesse Diana est morte aujourd'hui. Princess Diana died today. At which point I think, oh my God, that's it, it's all over. They've knocked out the headlines, everything. Now, I will tell you now, and people will pull me up for this, I think they already had a plan to assassinate Diana because she was going to have Dodi Al-Fayed's child. They didn't want dynastic complications and so on. So I'm not saying they bumped her off to knock us out the headlines, but they already had a plan to bump her off, and this was the perfect time to execute it because they knew they'd then knock us out the headlines and we'd have no publicity for months, basically. But that was why I blew the whistle, because although I've seen other things going wrong, even them letting a Libyan terrorist officer into the country knowingly, thinking they could recruit him, them getting nowhere with that, and him setting up a terrorist network in Britain. So that again puts our lives at risk because they took a risk.
Well, we just had similar circumstances, didn't we, in Manchester recently, with the terrorists that came in from Libya that were recruited by the security services. They're involved at the Ariana Grande.
Yeah, well, this is another one. What's come out about this is that
the mainstream media have largely ignored that.
Yeah,
it came out in court.
The Libyan agent who went to MI6 to get the money in 1995 is the father of Salman Abedi. He was called Ramadan Abedi. His father was Salman Abedi, who was involved in the Manchester bombing. And the Manchester bombing, the witness reports talk about somebody coming in and leaving an explosive device that doesn't do very much and then getting out. He's actually followed by the police. This is called the recordings we have of the police. This is not a suicide bomber. So it's another story where we've been told a load of rubbish because of the involvement of the intelligence services. And I think exactly the same thing happens with 7/7 as well. There's no reliable photographs of those guys beyond the CCTV at Woodall services near Leeds. And just say again, Mohammed Sadiq Khan, one of those alleged 7/7 bombers, was an MI5 agent. So the two biggest attacks in this country.
Is that something you know, or something you? Is that something you know? I.e., somebody told you, or is that something you actually know? Sorry.
It's been put out by other people, but the reason I'm suspicious about it is it came out when they were passing pictures of this guy to the FBI. They obscured him, and that to me is the proof he was an agent. They didn't want the Americans to know who he was. That's my, inside MI5 knowledge to say he is an MI5 agent. I can't say it's been confirmed by MI5. But there's never been a formal inquiry into the 7/7 attacks. Never. We just got a narrative that was just wrong, basically.
And and Mohammed Al-Fayed, who had a file obviously at MI5, didn't he approach you and Annie?
Yeah, we went up to him to talk about the death of Princess Diana. And this was when I think I had one of the first attempts on my life, basically. The driver fell asleep at the wheel and he hit the central reservation but got the car back under control again. And that's a question that people have asked me very often is, why are you still alive? You've really got their noses. Why are you still alive? And I say, it's literally when I was an atheist, I say it's thanks to him up there. Because there have been around 10 attempts on my life involving 4 car accidents.
I've tried 5 times.
Food poisoning, meningitis. They've done a lot to try and get rid of me, and every time I've somehow seen them off at the pass. And I say the ones with the cars...
They can't be that incompetent.
Well, I say it's not incompetence. I actually do believe somebody up there wanted me alive, basically. That's the only reason I'm alive. Otherwise, I'd be dead.
So about Mohammed Al-Fayed and Harrods, didn't he want you to verify something or not verify something?
Yeah, this is another interesting story. Is he'd been offered these documents. Somebody was trying to sell him documents for £20 million, showing the collusion between the CIA and MI6 into the death of Diana. So he calls me up to his apartment overlooking the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, a very posh place. Didn't see him that occasion. I saw his head of security, and he just shows me these supposed telegrams. And I just laughed. In about 20 seconds, I said 6 reasons why these were obvious forgeries. Yeah. Then there's a period where nothing happens, and I'm wondering what's happened. And I think what they're saying to me is, oh, he's still working for the service, he's trying to distract you. But in the end, Mohammed Al-Fayed managed to get it verified, what I was saying, that these were fake documents. Yeah. And he had the guy arrested in Austria, the sting operation. But the funny thing was the guy, Oscar Lewinter, had come up already in Lockerbie, peddling false information in Lockerbie. So I already knew this agent involved, basically. Yeah. But that was a good example where I could actually... They don't like ex-intelligence officers being out there because they can do that. They can just stop that.
So it's Christopher Steele, who's left the service, still affiliated to the service, who was instrumental in creating the Trump dossier that turned out to be fake.
Yeah, I'd imagine that he's still obviously very much in touch with them. He got paid a fortune for that. So
it's all lies.
Yeah, it's all lies, yeah.
It's all lies.
I prepared a document recently called 9/11 to COVID-19, fakery in the war waged on mankind. I don't get paid anything for that. I get attacked for it, make my life difficult, but that's full of truth. They just don't want to know truth, and say the journalists don't want to know either. We have reached a situation in which anybody knows now if they step out of line, their lives will be destroyed, their careers will be taken away, their livelihood will be taken away, and if they carry on, they will be killed. We've got to understand as well, and people find this hard out there, but assassination is a routine policy of the elite for those who step too far over the mark. And people like David Kelly were obviously assassinated. There have been a whole lot of other people as well. I mean, even people like Gaddafi in Sudan.
George Galloway. George Galloway's recently made just a groundbreaking documentary called Killing Kelly, all about the strange death of Dr. David Kelly. I'm not going to ruin it for anybody. It's an absolute must-watch. It's an absolute must-watch. I mean, I'm a golden oldie, so when I was growing up, we had World in Action, we had real journalists holding power to count, doorstepping journalists, doorstepping politicians and shady business people, and were really unafraid to ask tough, difficult questions. I mean, I'd love to do that. George's documentary Killing Kelly is akin to that kind of level of journalism, which just isn't generally there anymore. Yeah. So it's a must-watch about David Kelly. I'm not going to ruin it and spoil what happens. You should see it. If you want to find out what happens to David Kelly, forget, did the government lie to you with their narrative? Absolutely.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
So with all these things, they lie. If you get on one side of them, they will assassinate you. And recently, the Japanese Prime Minister, the ex-Prime Minister Abe, what's his name, Shinzo, whatever his name is, he opposed all the COVID measures. He was assassinated. He went to come back into power. So
back to you. So you've been you're now arrested under the Official Secrets Act.
No. What happened first was that I was in France and they tried to arrest me with a view to an extradition to have me put in prison. Fortunately, I'd already given this interview secretly to the BBC about the plot, and the BBC, you say at that point, stood up to government and aired a panorama special. The first week I was in prison, an interview just outlining the entire plot.
Would the BBC do that today?
No, that's the point, no. But then we have Robin Cook, the Foreign Secretary for the new Labour government, goes on telly and says this is pure fantasy with no basis in fact. Even though he's had no time to investigate, it's clean on the end of MI6, they've said that. I say that too.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, I'm languishing in a bloody prison cell. At the same time, Jack Straw is saying that they should show mercy to General Pinochet, because the Spanish were asking for his extradition. It was a murderer of 3,000 of his own people.
Yeah, he threw them out of aircraft, didn't he? He threw live people out of aircraft.
Yeah, and Jack Straw was minded to show him mercy, but not me. Again, it shows you how their system works.
I agree with Jack on this one, by the way.
You do their bidding, like Pinochet, you murder 3,000 dissidents, you're fine, you're protected. But if you step out of it, start exposing it, like I did, or Assange, or Edward Snowden, they're actually down you like a ton of bricks.
So you're in prison. Talk us through what happens.
Well, what happens in France is they tried to build me up to the French government as being some kind of super spy. But obviously, as the court hearings go on, and I start mentioning the fact that they were going to try to assassinate Gaddafi, and this is why I'd left the service and everything else. The French became more sympathetic. When the British put through the final papers, the French almost laughed.
Yeah, they said no, didn't they?
They said no straight away.
They said no,
yeah. And they essentially said this is a political case and therefore exempt from extradition treaties.
Fantastic.
So I do say what is technically the oldest modern democracy, because the French Constitution precedes the American Constitution by about 6 months. The oldest modern democracy declared me to be a political prisoner, basically, and therefore freed me. I lived in Paris for a couple of years, and this is where I really did lead them a merry dance, because I say I used a legal route to elope Tony Blair to this plot, and that they then had me arrested with a view to extradition and thrown in prison. Yeah. So I came out. Interestingly, somebody came along claiming to be from the Libyan services, tried to recruit me, turned them down. Although I think he was probably an MI6.
Yeah, just seeing if you're going to be a traitor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I got access to the document I was talking about, the CX report. And I put that on the internet. I make no qualms about that, because to say that Robin Cook had lied about it, this was the murder of innocent people, the funding of our terrorist enemies, and so I put it on the internet. And even that was reported by the mainstream media in those days, but they still got away with it.
Yeah, of course.
This is what I mean. All the time.
So when you came back to the UK, you were arrested? Talk us through what happened.
Yeah, I came back voluntarily to the UK. I was arrested as soon as I set foot in Dover. And it was quite funny, because the copper who arrested me apologised. I mean, how many people ever have a copper apologise about arresting them? This guy said, "I'm really sorry about this, but I got arrested." Official Secrets Act. And what we later found out was
from the Parks Police.
Yeah, after this process ended, The police made a special point of taking me out for a coffee and saying we wanted absolutely nothing to do with this. This was done entirely by the new Labour government. Again, I was prosecuted by the Attorney General, not by somebody outside the government. It was a government prosecution. And if people look at what happened at my trial, I was denied the ability...
Was Keir Starmer involved in your
Yes,
trial?
he was. Keir Starmer was involved. He cocked things up to start with, really. Yeah. And I have wondered...
Deliberately?
Well, this is what I wondered. I mean, at the time...
What sort of things did he cock up?
It was to do with what sort of trial we were going to have. And it finished up, we had these series of pre-trial hearings in which you couldn't put evidence in. But as a result of the ruling of the pre-trial hearings, I couldn't put evidence into the court case. So I couldn't speak freely in my defence, and I couldn't freely cross-examine the witnesses on the stand.
So
the fundamentals of a fair trial. Basically.
No, of course. And also, you couldn't... under British law, under the Official Secrets Act, there's no public defence immunity.
Yeah, this is what we tried to argue in the legal arguments.
That
if what you'd done was in the... obviously in my case, it was obviously in the public interest.
Of course.
You know these things.
Yeah. Your money
is
being spent by the government to fund terrorists.
Yeah.
Terrorists, and I want you to know.
And also,
but you can't say that, so there's no defence for that.
And also the fact that they didn't cause damage to national security. There was no damage to national security at all.
It was embarrassment.
Again, yeah.
It was embarrassment.
Yeah.
Massive embarrassment.
So when they put me on trial, I say...
We go back to Keir Starmer, so...
Starmer was supposed to be doing something with these pre-trial hearings. You got it wrong, and that was basically where the case started to fall apart from my point of view. Now, at the time, I thought this man's an idiot.
Yeah.
And I do wonder whether it was all done deliberately so he could now have the career he has, basically. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me. But I would say with all this thing, never trust anybody in the law, because they're not about law.
Well, you saw what happened to me.
Yeah. In the Law Society, they are a separate society from us. That's how Keir Starmer's got away with this drinking thing in Harrogate. It's not because he wasn't guilty under the facts. He was guilty under the facts, obviously. It was the fact that he can claim no jurisdiction because he's not a normal run-of-the-mill citizen. He's a member of the Law Society rather than the Society of the UK. So the Society of the UK has no jurisdiction over him with regard to legality. That's how he got away with it, I think.
So you've got a series of pre-trial hearings before you go to... And you were at the Old Bailey, weren't you?
Yeah, the Bailey, yeah.
So you've got a magistrates' court, and then you've obviously got Crown Courts and obviously the Old Bailey. So in a magistrates' court, the magistrates could sentence anyone for anything is, I believe, 6 months.
Yeah.
And then when you go to a Crown Court, or obviously the Old Bailey, then obviously the sentencing guidelines just go crazy. So we get to... So tell me what happened at the Old Bailey.
Well, it was very frustrating. By this point, they tried to totally wear me down. My health had gone. It's the only time in my life I've taken pharmaceutical drugs. I was taking omeprazole to stop acid reflux because of the stress. I was taking Zopicone to sleep. This is on top of a load of weed as well. And that's the only time in my life I've ever suffered long-term health problems because I was so stressed. They could have given me 6 years, you know. So and another thing was, of course, because we'd been through these pre-trial hearings, they decided there was no defence in law for what I could do.
Yeah.
Therefore, my barrister at the time, Jeff Robertson, had to be dismissed. He couldn't defend me in court.
Because he couldn't say anything?
Yeah, because he's a sworn, he's part of the Law Society, and the Law Society judge has already decided there's no defence. So no barrister could defend me. I had to defend myself in court as a result of that. Even then, I had one more pre-trial hearing with the judge in which I wiped the floor with argument. I went through the whole stuff about Article 10, right to free speech, the implications of this, all this stuff, wiped the floor with him, and he just ruled against me, basically.
But, okay, going back to that, did you feel, I mean, you're having a one-to-one with the judge, did you feel that the judge was listening to you?
No, the judge was deliberately, again, and I found this out later on, people are going to find this crazy, but our trials are not fair trials. They take place in the legal system, and quite often, prosecution, defence and judge have already got together and decided what's going to happen, basically. You're not told that, because you sign a form saying that the defender acts as your attorney. An attorney is somebody who can make decisions for you, not just somebody who represents your decisions. There's a difference, yeah?
So did you have a jury or just a judge?
I had a jury.
You did have a jury?
I had a jury, yeah. But the jury, they weren't allowed to hear anything, basically. That was the problem. The judge shut me down every time I tried something, like that. It was just, at one point I caught them out about national security. He wouldn't deal with that. He wouldn't rule the difference between national security and national interest, which was vital to my arguments in law. So no, it was totally biased. He became a law lord a few years later. Can I make that clear? My trial judge, Mr. Justice Moses, would you believe, became a law lord a few years later. This is how it works. You do their bidding, you get promoted, basically.
So the jury, did the jury at any point hear you address the court saying public money went to fund Al-Qaeda and terrorism? Did those words come out and did the jury hear that?
No, they came very close because what happened...
I'm sure you tried.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't give up at all. I wouldn't. I'd go nuts.
Well, what happens is I'd have to write out my defence and give it to the judge before I made the defence from the witness box. He then cross loads of it out and said, you can say this. And I then got into the witness box and pushed it as far as possible.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, when I left the service, I witnessed a heinous crime. And of course the jury all up like this.
Yeah.
So when I finished, I said, the jury are clearly interested in this. They have a right to ask questions, which they do. And he refused to let the jury ask questions. So they say it was just I mean, you know, somebody else commented it would have been like Monty Python. It was so funnily biased and extremely biased if it hadn't been so serious.
Must have been heartbreaking for you.
It was obviously frustrating and everything else.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. Because I blew the whistle for good reason. I stand by those good reasons, protection of human life.
I know you're a good man.
And every single person on the other side, in the state, in the intelligence services, and so on, have behaved, as far as I'm concerned, evilly. And I do believe in divine justice and redemption, and those people will get their judgment unless they repent over what they've done. Also, I'd love to see them repent. I'd love to see them come out and confess to all their sins. But they're not going to do that because they're literally so bereft of true morality, they don't even realise they're sinning anymore, basically. That's why they have the problems we do in the world.
So back to court. The judge... So did you plead guilty?
No, I was not guilty.
So you pled not guilty.
Yeah.
The jury found you guilty. What do they think they found you guilty of? Breaching the national security.
Let's make this absolutely clear. The judge told them, and again, he directed the jury. You're not supposed to direct the jury as a judge. He told them if there was evidence I'd worked for MI5, and said anything about MI5 without permission, that was the criminal offence they were going to convict me of. So that's what I was convicted of. They'll tell you all sorts of things in the papers that I was convicted
so I'm asking you.
Releasing classified information, so on. That was not the charge. The charge was I worked for MI5, I said something about MI5 without their permission, and they managed to get 3 charges out of that because they involved the documents I took to prove my bona fides and something else as well. So. But yeah, so that in terms of what I was actually convicted of has got to be the very lowest end of conviction.
Yeah. Well, it is the lowest then because of the conviction. The actual sentence was 6 months.
Yeah.
Which is the minimum they could possibly. They couldn't give you any less.
Yeah.
It's the minimum they could give you.
Well, that was it. I mean, I do joke that I must have got the lowest sentence.
I mean, you could have got that for a serious speeding offence. In a magistrate's court.
Yeah. But the point is, I was at the Bailey, and therefore, normally at the Bailey, you're either acquitted, you walk out, or you get done for something serious, and you're going to be in there for at least a year, if not 18 years.
Yeah, forever.
So I claim to have the lowest sentence ever given out at the Bailey.
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
6 months.
So did any of the press talk to you?
What about?
So while the trial was going on, did any of the press have a little private word with you? Or
I'd been constantly talking to the press around.
And obviously they're all gagged, so they were limited with what they could or couldn't say.
Yeah, there was all
that,
stuff
obviously.
like that. Yeah.
Was there any that were they sympathetic in general?
Yeah, it's like a lot of journalists be sympathetic to you in private, but will still go and do the stuff in public.
Yeah, sure.
Because they've got a mortgage to pay.